Hi, my name is Buhrs and welcome to my video about 5 instructional design models. Now before I jump in, I'm going to give you just a little bit of a brief history about what instructional design is, what its use is, what a model is, and a bit of history behind how instructional design came about. The 5 instructional design models that I'll be discussing today are GAGN'S 9 events, the ADDIE process, SAM, Bloom's taxonomy, and MERRILL'S principles. I'll be doing them in that order. I'll be going through each one, explaining exactly what this model is and how you can use it, and then at the end of the video I'm going to explain how it relates to ideation and how I would use these separate models in the workspace every single day. So let's jump right in. So what is instructional design? Instructional design is the creation of learning experiences and materials in a manner that results in the acquisition and application of knowledge and skills. What is an instructional design model? A model is a way of doing something or a representation of reality. A method or structure for developing instructional materials is an instructional design model. It aids instructional designers in giving the learning material structure and purpose. It enables them to envision the training requirements and break down the training material design process into stages. These models provide guidance for ensuring that preparation meets the desired outcomes and addresses the learning objectives. So now that we know what instructional design is and what an instructional design model is, let's jump into the 5 models that I've chosen. The first one being GAGN'S 9 events. GAGN'S 9 events of instruction was developed or invented by a man by the name of Robert GAGN'S, who was an educational visionary. He's arguably the person who discovered instructional design in World War II all those years back. The basic principle between GAGN'S 9 events is that different things should be taught differently, and that not every single person learns the same way. Some people may be an audio learner, a visual learner, or some of them are maybe even good at learning through reading. So it's all about understanding what you're teaching and who you're teaching it to. By doing this, students will achieve better learning outcomes and be more successful as a student. An amazing thing about this model is that GAGN'S 9 principles can be easily interchanged with Bloom's taxonomy, and that it is very flexible in what it can produce and how people can go about using it to teach. So, GAGN'S 9 events go as follows. Number 1 being gaining the attention of the student. Before teaching the subject matter, the teacher needs to gain the pupil's attention. They can do this by icebreakers or provoking some conversation about recent controversial events, just so that the student is in the mindset of learning, or their mind is switched on rather. The second point is that the teacher needs to inform the learners of the objectives. So tell the learners what they are going to learn throughout the class. The third point is that the teacher needs to stimulate recall of prior learning. So the teacher needs to bring up what they either learned in the last lesson, something that they are building upon, and show the students that what they learned last lesson isn't mutually exclusive. Then number 4, the teacher can finally present the content for the lesson, whether it's through slides, group discussions, but make the courseware interactive and the lesson interactive, because the more interactive it is, the higher the chance the pupil will retain that information. Number 5, provide learning guidance. There's no use in letting the student guess what they need to know. Make sure that you nail down exactly what it is that the pupils need to know, and make it obvious to them that they will need to know this for future tests, assignments, essays, or whatever it is. Number 6 is elicit performance or practice. Make sure that your students partake in class activities, group discussions, and assignments. It is imperative that they practice the knowledge that they have just learned, because they'll be able to retain that information better. Number 7 is provide feedback. Provide feedback in a timely fashion that is objective, positive, and overall constructive towards the learner. Then number 8, assess performance. This is where you can conduct a formal assessment such as an essay, a test, an exam, to really test what learning outcomes the learner has retained and can put down onto paper. And then number 9, enhance retention and transfer. This is the most important aspect in my opinion. Once the learner has learned this information, they've got it in their head, they've absorbed it, it is up to the teacher or lecturer. It is a teacher or lecturer's responsibility to help the student retain this information as best they can. So that is the GAGN'S 9 events for instruction. It was the first model that was ever created back in World War II. The next model up is the ADDIE process. Now, the ADDIE process is one of the most common processes or models being used at the moment within industry. ADDIE stands for Analyze, Design, Develop, Integrate, and Evaluate. This is a non-linear process, so you can go back and forth between each stage depending on what you're looking for and what the client is looking for. So let's jump straight into the analysis phase. In this phase, the instructional problem is clarified. The instructional objectives and goals are created, and the learner's existing knowledge, skills, and environments are established. Basically, what you're trying to do here is create a checklist for yourself, so that once we get through to the evaluate phase, you'll have something to come and look back on and see if you hit all your points. The second phase being the design phase. This is where all the assessment instruments, learning objectives, content, exercises, lesson planning, subject matter analysis, and media selection is dealt with in a systematic and specific way. So this is now where you take your checklist and you sort of create a background for it. You create the storyboards that will need to go into the course. You create what needs to go into the course. You design the logos, the look, the feel, the content of the course. That all happens within the design phase. After the design phase is the development phase. This is where you give these designs and these storyboards over to the development team, where they then craft or code a program around what the design is, what the design team has come up with. The development team will spend quite a while on this, trying to execute exactly what the design team has. And this is also an example of where you can go back and forth, where the process is not linear. The development team, for example, will make a logo. Then the design team will say, no, could you tweak this, tweak that? Then it'll go back to the development phase. The development team will tweak it and test it, send it back for feedback, and so forth. You understand where I'm going with that. Following the development phase is the implementation phase. This is where you take this product that we now have, being a learning course or an e-learning course, and we give it out to our client for them to test. We test it, they test it, we sort of trial run it. This phase requires continuous testing, continuous tweaking, and then finally the evaluation phase. This is now building upon the implementation phase and what we sort of take away from the implementation phase. The evaluation phase is where we go back to the top. We go back to the analysis phase, and we see, did we check off every single point we wanted to hit? How well did we do it? And is the customer happy? So basically, in conclusion, the evaluation phase is just making sure that we've ticked everything that we laid out in the analysis phase. Once again, if we're not happy with what we have at the end, we can always go back because the process is non-linear. Now, the third model that we're going to be looking at is called SAM, Successive Approximation Model. Now, SAM is more of a rapid design and develop model. It's very quick, fast-paced, not as slow as an ADDIE process. This model is broken up into three basic phases: the preparation phase, the iterative design phase, and the iterative development phase. Now, within the preparation phase, we're looking to get the background of the problem. So we're gathering information, who our target market is, what we're designing, who we're designing for. Basically, like we said in the ADDIE process, it's that checklist we want, so that at the end we can tick the boxes and make sure that our product checked all the boxes. Once our information is gathered, we go into something called a savvy start. Now, savvy start is where we get everyone around the table, the clients and us, and we all brainstorm, design, prototype in a very fast-paced sort of manner, getting as many ideas out there as possible, so that we have a diverse range of designs, prototypes. We know what's working, what isn't working very quickly. Once we've gone through the savvy start, we head into the iterative design phase. Now, within the iterative design phase, what we're going to be doing is designing, prototyping, and reviewing. It's much like the savvy start. However, instead of having everyone there, the whole big team, this is very much smaller department. So instead of having the whole group, we're going to have little pockets of people doing specific things, making sure that the process is snappy and that we have the best people doing the tasks that they are good at. So after savvy start, we go into project planning. Now, this is where the timelines need to be sorted out, the budgets, who's doing what. Everything needs to be put into a neat timeline, a neat time frame that we can give to the client, so that we can hit every single deadline when they want the product to be done by. After project planning, we head into additional design. Now, additional design is where we take all those little bits that we came up with in Savvy Start and we start adding to them. We start adding a little bit to this design. It starts becoming a bit more tangible, or something that we can show the client physically. Also within the additional design, the team should look at making 3 full designs. This is so that no one really gets attached to any one design, and that we are very objective in the way that we go about designing these products and tackling the problem at hand. It also gives the customers a little bit more variety and a little bit more choice depending on what they want. We then enter the iterative development phase. Now, within this phase, all we're doing is developing, implementing and evaluating and continuing on this cycle until the project is done. Now, in this phase, it's critical to build smaller chunks and get end user feedback. Unlike the ADDIE process that only receives feedback from the customer right at the end, SAM has components available for the learners to use and the client to assess throughout the process. That is its most distinguishing factor, that there's multiple points of feedback instead of feedback right at the end like in ADDIE. Now, if that feedback comes back positive, that's great, then the project will continue as it is and it'll be completed probably quicker. However, if the customer or learners come back and they aren't happy and the feedback is negative, there's no problem with that. We just go back to the iterative design phase, sort of rethink what we were trying to make, and then get feedback, and if they're happy, then we push the project on further. Then we move on to the final little bit of the SAM model, and that is the alpha, beta, gold release. It's quite simple really. The first release is the alpha, and this is the release of the full project in its full form, completed. We give that to the customer, that is, or the learners or customer, and that is called the alpha. That then goes for iterations and tests, and we get feedback, we change it a bit, then that's called the beta, which is the second fully loaded project. And then once everything is complete, the customer's happy, the learner's happy, we're happy, every point has been hit, then we release the gold standard, and that would be the final product. To summarize, SAM allows the designers and the team to test their course early and often, as well as react quickly to the changes that are happening. This continuous feedback loop is the driving force behind the coherent project and the adaptability of this model. Now, moving on to our 4th model, the Bloom's taxonomy model. Similar to the GAGNE'S 9 events, you need to do one before you can move to the other. The Bloom's taxonomy goes as follows. At the bottom, it is remember, then it's understand, apply, analyze, evaluate, and create. The Bloom's taxonomy model is quite simple. Once a learner can remember something, then they can move one up to where they understand and move their way all the way up until they can create something using that knowledge that they have. Creation is the ultimate form of knowledge. You really have to understand and know something before you can create something using that knowledge. I added the Bloom's taxonomy model into this presentation or video because it builds off of the GAGNE'S 9 events. It's very similar and can be interchanged with the GAGNE'S 9 events. So if you ever use the GAGNE'S 9 events or the Bloom's taxonomy model, realize that you're not just working with one model, but you have the ability to take pieces from each one and interchange them. Then our 5th and final model is MERRILL'S principles of instruction. Now, the reason I chose this model to add in as sort of like a bonus one is because it's very problem-based, which is everything ideation is. Merrill is basically saying within these principles that in order to learn something, you have to revolve that around a real-life problem, a problem that you are having. David Merrill says that task-based learning is organized around 5 fundamental concepts. He claims that problem solving is at the core of genuinely positive learning experiences. To fully comprehend the knowledge and apply it in real world, online learners must actively interact with the e-learning material. This entails a multi-phase process that includes activation, presentation, integration, and other key elements. So he bases this theory about learning around a problem on a couple of principles. The first one being the principle of demonstration. He says that a course or learning material should display their content in various ways, through charts, through infographics, visuals, text, stuff like that, so that it is more relatable to the students and that they can retain that information easier. The second principle is that of application. Once you learn something, it is important that you understand it and therefore can apply it. If a learner cannot apply the knowledge that they have, then that learning or knowledge is void. There's no use if you can't use it in real life. And then the final principle that he talks of is integration. What he means by integration is facilitating that knowledge that the learner now knows and integrating it into their real life problems. This is the whole basis of Merrill's principles, being so heavily rooted in that of real life problems and using the knowledge that the learners have in their own lives. So those are the 5 models that we have looked at. I'm not going to speak about how these models can relate to my journey path, my career path, and where I would use them. So I'm going to use the example of a customer. I have a business and a customer comes to me. The first and foremost model that I would use is the ADDIE model, just because it's been tested and proven. Many businesses use it and it is a reliable model to use for customers. So yeah, I would use that to solve problems if I had quite a lot of time, if they had the right amount of resources as well. If the customer didn't have that much time, then I would use the SAM model. Similar to ADDIE, but you get your feedback throughout the model and throughout the timeline. We then use the Bloom's taxonomy and the GAGNE'S 9 events on my customers. So really get my customers to understand how people learn and how we can create the course around those principles, around those 9 principles, or if it's Bloom's taxonomy, then those 6 principles, and how we can really integrate this information and allow the learners to retain this information as best as possible. And then Merrill's principles of instruction, I would use this in the courseware. Really understanding that in order for a customer or a learner to understand, retain, and use the information we provide to them in a real life situation, I would definitely use Merrill's principles for this and integrate that into the courses. In conclusion, these are 5 very powerful models, especially in my field of ideation. I look forward to using some of them in my work to come this year and throughout my career. And hopefully I can make an impact on the ideation industry using these models. Thank you for listening to this video and watching this video. I hope you learned something and I hope that you have a great day.